Hi, my name is Daniel Hayden from Restore America's Estuaries. Welcome to our final session. One of the themes we wanted to address in the summit is engaging with Congress. During our final session today of the summit, we'll hear from the leadership of the Bipartisan Estuary Caucus and their work to protect and restore estuaries and coasts. On behalf of Restore America's Estuaries and our 10 members from coast to coast, I'd like to thank the leadership of the Estuary Caucus, Representative Bonamici, Democrat from Oregon, Representative Mass, Republican from Florida, Representative Posey, Republican from Florida, and Representative Larson, Democrat from Washington. The caucus was established in 2017 to help educate leaders at all levels of government on the importance of estuaries and has been instrumental in supporting bipartisan efforts to invest in our coasts and coastal communities. They are showing that together we can support resilient coasts, thriving habitats, and vibrant coastal communities. I'd also like to thank Rick Inez from ANEP, Rebecca Roth from NERA, and Rachel Keelan from the Coastal States Organization in helping organize today's session. We represent 4 distinct organizations, but we've got a lot of common things and common issues, and it's been really great working together on today's event. With that, I'll hand it over to Bradley Watson from the Coastal States Organization.
Thank you, Daniel. And hi, I'm Bradley Watson, the Executive Director of the Coastal States Organization. The Coastal States Organization extends our thanks and appreciation to the members of Congress and congressional staff for joining this discussion. CSO works with our governor-appointed delegates from the nation's coastal states, territories, and commonwealths to ensure and maintain a leadership role in the development and implementation of national coastal and ocean policy. For that end, we are pleased to have Brian Lynn from the Washington State Department of Ecology, who recently completed his 2-year term as chair of the Coastal States Organization, moderate this discussion. During this panel, we will learn from our members of the appropriations committees, Darren Benjamin and Melissa Zimmerman, on how to best work with Congress, and from 2 leaders in estuary conservation, Rachel Rouillard and NERA President Lisa R. Miller, on what has been effective from their experience. First, we will hear from the members of the Estuary Caucus, and then Brian will begin the panel discussion. Thank you very much, and enjoy.
I'd like to introduce the Honorable Representative Suzanne Bonamici from Oregon.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici from Northwest Oregon. I co-chair the House Oceans Caucus and the Congressional Estuary Caucus. The Columbia River serves as the northern boundary of the district I represent, and the Pacific Ocean is the western boundary. Oregon's economic vitality is dependent on the health of the Pacific Ocean and the lower Columbia River estuary. Last year, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a special report on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate. The findings are dire. 20 to 90% of coastal wetlands will be lost by 2100 because of sea level rise and habitat degradation. I serve on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, the only member from the Pacific Northwest, and I recently joined my colleagues in releasing a bold, science-based, comprehensive climate action plan to set our nation on a path to net zero emissions no later than mid-century and net negative thereafter. And I'm thrilled that our plan recognizes the power of our ocean and estuaries as part of the solution to mitigate the climate crisis. Our climate action plan sets the ambitious goal of protecting at least 30% of our lands and ocean no later than 2030. These protections will help enhance the ecological benefits, biodiversity, and carbon sequestration value of natural ecosystems and our most treasured wild places. Also, our coastal wetlands are often overlooked and undervalued, but they are among the world's most productive working ecosystems. Wetlands reduced flooding and coastal erosion, and they protect our shorelines and property from damage in the face of sea level rise and extreme weather events. They promote biodiversity and offer critical habitat for the Pacific Northwest's prized Dungeness crab and Chinook and coho salmon. I'm excited that my Blue Carbon for Our Planet Act, which I worked on closely with Restore America's Estuaries and the National Estuarine Research Reserves Association, is a cornerstone of our ocean recommendations in the Climate Action Plan. This bipartisan bill will help strengthen blue carbon research and support the conservation and restoration of blue carbon ecosystems so we can maximize this effective carbon sequestration tool in our fight against the climate crisis. I will continue to advocate for strong funding for the National Estuary programs and programs like the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund to help enhance the resiliency of our estuaries. Thank you for all of your leadership. I look forward to our continued work together to protect our nation's estuaries.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Bonamici. Now I'd like to introduce the Honorable Rick Larson from the state of Washington.
Hi, and I want to thank the Restore America's Estuaries for inviting me to join you at your 10th annual National Coastal and Estuarine Summit. I'm Congressman Rick Larson. I'm from the 2nd Congressional District in Washington State, and I want you to think of that as the district that is north of Seattle and none of Seattle in terms of geography. And my district hugs the Puget Sound and the Salish Sea. And I want to also let you know I serve as the co-chair of the Congressional Estuary Caucus. I appreciate the work everyone here has done to protect and preserve our estuaries around the country and around the world. As co-chair of the Estuary Caucus, I'm fighting to protect important species like orcas and salmon, and I oppose the rollbacks of vital protections for those species. Protections that are found in the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Endangered Species Act, as a for instance. The 2nd District is home to parts of Puget Sound. It is the nation's largest estuary by total volume. And it connects rivers and streams, diverse wildlife, and marine ecosystems. Puget Sound is a cornerstone of Northwest Washington's maritime economy and environment, and also the Puget Sound is really part of our cultural identity in the Pacific Northwest. And last week, at the beginning of National Estuaries Week, I joined NOAA staff on a virtual tour of estuaries in my district, including the Smith Island project in Everett, which is the 2nd largest estuary restoration project in the Puget Sound. Touring these projects has helped me to better understand the importance of federal funding in protecting our estuaries. And despite the ongoing pandemic, the work done by local communities and public partners to restore estuaries must continue. And ensuring federal investments in these estuaries is important as well. So I want to cover a few things that we've done in Congress. Recently, the House passed the Moving Forward Act. It's a comprehensive long-term infrastructure package. It includes funding, robust funding for public lands, and as a robust resiliency title as well, to strengthen the nation's coasts and restore critical habitat and marine ecosystems. Specifically, the Moving Forward Act provides $250 million for the new EPA program office for the Puget Sound, $3 billion to support shovel-ready coastal restoration projects focused on fish and wildlife conservation and climate change adaptation, $50 million for living shoreline grants to improve resilience, and a $250 million reauthorization of the EPA's National Estuaries Program through 2026. In addition to that, at a time when salmon in the Puget Sound are endangered and climate change threatens our coastal communities, further federal investment in the Puget Sound is critical. And according to the EPA, for every dollar invested in the National Estuary Program, NEP leverages an estimated $19 in local funds. So as co-chair of the Estuary Caucus, I led bipartisan efforts to fund the EPA's National Estuary Program in the FY 2021 appropriations bill. This funding is a big deal in the Northwest, and I'll continue to push for full funding for local projects. Another priority of mine is salmon in the Puget Sound. Salmon is an important cultural symbol, environmental linchpin, and frankly, a truly delicious fish. if we have them. And I will continue to champion bipartisan efforts to protect the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund. Congress must also recommit to efforts to preserving endangered species, especially with the population of the southern resident killer whales at alarming lows. I recently helped secure passage of the Water Resources Development Act, or WRDA, of 2020, bipartisan legislation which included provisions I championed to boost federal resources for critical habitat restoration. I worked with Representative Kim Schreier from my state to expand funding availability for nature-based aquatic ecosystem restoration and improve salmon and steelhead passage and critical habitats. Also included is language to improve federal investment in the reuse of clean, dredged material from waterways and channels to support ecosystem and shoreline restoration, as well as to deal with storm damage reduction and, of course, to promote resiliency. In conclusion, I want to thank you for your continued efforts on estuary restoration. As you know, there's a lot of work left to do to protect and to restore estuaries for the use and enjoyment of current and future generations. I stand ready to help. I am able to help, and we will help. So thank you again for inviting me. I look forward to meeting you someday on Capitol Hill, or, be my preference, somewhere in the Puget Sound, enjoying our local estuary. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Representative Larson, for that presentation. I'd now like to introduce the Honorable Brian Mast from Florida.
Hey everyone, Congressman Brian Mast here from Florida's 18th Congressional District. I hope that you're all doing well. It's an honor to welcome you to this year's virtual National Coastal and Estuarian Summit. I'm sorry that I couldn't join you in person this year. I want to make sure that I was able to join you virtually for just a few minutes to celebrate the progress that we've made over the past year in our fight to protect and restore our coastal estuaries. Now, as you all know, our estuaries are more than just nice places to recreate. They're essential to our environment, our nation's economy, our entire way of life. That's why we care about them. That's why I've made it my mission since coming into Congress to protect our environment and preserve Florida's most precious resource, its waterways. So, as a co-chair of the Congressional Estuary Caucus, I know that keeping our water clean and our ecosystems healthy, it's one of the biggest challenges of the 21st century across the country. But we've continued to make great progress towards that goal, especially on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure. For example, earlier this year, Congress passed the Protect and Restore America's Estuaries Act. Very proud to be working on that one. This bipartisan legislation, which I co-sponsored, it nearly doubled the funding authorization for the National Estuary Program to protect estuaries across the country. In total, this legislation had authorized $250 million in funding for water quality projects across the country. Now, this is so important because estuaries, including the Indian River Lagoon, the St. Lucie Estuary, and my community here, they're all home to some of the most diverse ecosystems in the entire world. And beyond that, they're our homes. We care about them. We love them. We care about our homes. That's why we want to keep them clean. Working together to pass this legislation, it was a big win in our fight to improve water quality and protect our estuaries. We all know there's still a lot of work to be done. So what is next? Let's talk about that. First, we're fighting against a harmful regime of toxic spraying that is intended to manage invasive plants, but in reality is dumping poison into our waterways. And that's very literal, which in turn is hurting our fishing industry. It's exacerbating water quality issues and harming Everglades restoration. My standard is very simple, that if I wouldn't put something in the bathtub with my kids, it definitely doesn't belong in our waterways either. So I will keep fighting on this front to find alternatives to toxic spraying, like mechanical and biological management of these invasive plant species. Second, this is what we're also doing. We are locked in a heated battle over the future of Florida's waterways. Our goal is simple: to finally achieve shared adversity, prioritize both Florida's public health and environment. Special interest groups are lobbying to put their personal profit ahead of clean water and public health. I refuse to let that happen. So as we move forward in this fight, I'm going to keep advocating to stop toxic discharges, prevent pollution that is ruining Lake Okeechobee and our estuaries as that water gets dumped out of Lake Okeechobee into our coastal estuaries, send more water south into Florida's Everglades during the dry season so that the Everglades get the water that they need, so our coastal estuaries don't get fresh water dumped on them that they don't need. These are the goals that we are working for. My hope is this, that in these ways we can work together to strengthen conservation programs, defend our environment, and protect our waterways, because at the end of the day, this is only the beginning. We have to go out there and continue to address water pollution, change harmful operations that are destroying critical ecosystems, and ensure that our waters continue to be fishable and swimmable and boatable, places that our kids can go jump off the docks, not because we told them that the water is okay, but because we know that the water is clean and pristine and that they're not going to contract anything from getting into those waterways because we know that we've taken care of them. Together, I am confident that we can protect our waterways for public use instead of allowing them to be destroyed by private profiteers, building on the progress that we've already made to improve our water quality and help our communities thrive. That's how we do it. So I look forward to working side by side with you as we continue this fight. So on that note, I just want to say again, I welcome you all again today to today's event, and thank you all for letting me join you today, and I wish you all the best. You all take care.
Thank you very much, Representative Mast. Now I'd like to introduce Representative Bill Posey of Florida.
Hello, I'm Congressman Bill Posey of the 8th District of Florida, a district that borders the Indian River Lagoon, one of the most biodiverse estuaries in North America. I'm pleased and honored to welcome you to the 10th National Estuarine and Coastal Summit and our celebration of the 32nd anniversary of National Estuaries Week. In the last Congress, I co-founded the Congressional Estuary Caucus with Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici to bring attention to our estuaries, which are so vital to our ecology and our economy, as well as to mobilize resources to care for and restore them. 33 years ago, Senator John Chaffee authored the National Estuary Program. Senator Chaffee had a favorite Yogi Berra expression: "You can see a lot just by looking." A summit such as this one brings new eyes and expertise to the challenges of keeping our estuaries healthy so that they can continue to serve us as nurseries for sea life, vibrant habitats, fisheries, and places where families go for recreation. So please keep looking and letting us know what you see and what you see we need to do for our estuaries. Senator Chaffee also taught us, quote, "Give nature a chance and she will rebound, but you must give nature that chance." As we pursue the theme of forging a national imperative, unifying the coastal community, we need to unite around that vision, giving nature a chance, and when nature rebounds, she will in turn take care of us. I'm proud of our Estuary Caucus achievements. We've worked together to reauthorize the National Estuary Program at $250 million over 5 years beyond fiscal year 2021. The program is popular and a success because it empowers visionary and competent leadership at the state, local, tribal, and private levels. The structure of local leadership with federal financial support is a model for government programs. We've also been fully funding the National Estuary Program over the last several years. In the Interior and Environmental Appropriations bill that just passed the House, the program makes available $675,000 to each of the 28 estuaries of national significance listed in the bill, and it provides an additional $1,500,000 for competitive grants. The reauthorization and funding of the program are successful because we work together through the bipartisan Congressional Estuary Caucus, and because we have the essential support of people like you. We will need your help in the future, and we're so fortunate you will be there to help us. So have a great summit, and together let's look for those opportunities to give nature a chance. God bless you, and God bless America.
Okay, I think we are gathered up here. So, Great. I wanted to welcome you all. So we are ready to start the panel discussion here. I want to thank you all for joining us here for the last panel presentation of the 2020 summit. Really glad you stuck around here to the very end, and I think we have a great panel ahead of here and good discussion coming, so I don't think you'll regret it. So my name is Brian Lynn. I am the Coastal Program Manager in the state of Washington and also the outgoing chair of our Coastal States organization. And I'm coming to you today from the shores of Puget Sound, our big estuary here in Washington. And the fog is actually just lifted, the sun is shining. But despite that, I'm very happy to be here with you all. So normally at this point, I would ask the audience, if we're all together in the room, to give a nice round of applause to our panelists, our congressional leaders from the Estuary Caucus, Representatives Bonamici, Larson, Mast, and Posey. But since we're not together, I'll just ask that you just quietly clap in your own space, and I'm sure they will sense your appreciation there. So I think we all understand how important it is to have an engaged and informed Congress as we go about our work restoring and protecting and managing our coasts and estuaries. And we all have this certain role that we play wherever we're coming from, but we know that Congress makes important decisions about on the budget front and on the policy front that can significantly affect the success in our work. So the question is, how do we best engage them? How do we inform them? How do we influence them? How do we work with them? What are the best strategies to use? What's been most effective? Those are the burning questions of the day. And so to help provide some answers to these questions, we have invited a great panel here with a couple of leaders in estuary conservation, and as well as a couple of our congressional appropriations staff. And I'll introduce each of them as we go along. I've also apparently invited my dog to the session here too. So you'll get to meet her, hopefully no more, but we'll see. So, the format of this is pretty simple. We've asked each panel member to give an opening presentation just to share their thoughts on this topic and from their perspective. And then we'll save time at the end for some questions and some discussion. So for all of you listening in, feel free at any point to ask questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can at the end with the time that we have. So without further delay, let's get to our panel. I'll start by introducing you all to Rachel Rouillard. She's the director of the Piscataqua Region Estuaries Partnership in New Hampshire. It's nice to see you, Rachel.
Hi, Brian. Nice to see you too. Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. I cannot think of a better way to start this panel conversation than to come off that video, which was really inspiring. You could just feel the enthusiasm and the passion and dedication that our Estuary Caucus members have for our work. And, you know, it's not every day that we get to hear that directly from them. So what a great way to begin this conversation. As Brian said, I'm Rachel Rouillard. I'm with the Piscataqua Region Estuaries Partnership. We're up in New Hampshire and Maine. And before I get started, I want to say a little bit about the National Estuary Program. I'm sure that most or all of you are familiar with who we are, but we're essentially a network of 28 programs in 28 estuarine systems across the country. We're an EPA program, and we focus on delivering science to inform decision making. And really the hallmark of the National Estuary Program is to convene diverse stakeholder groups, and Congressman Posey alluded to that, to really help inform decision making using that good science. So that's what we do, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how the National Estuary Programs has succeeded in building and sustaining congressional support, and actually not just congressional support, but support at the local and state levels as well. So there are some consistent things that we've been doing as an NEP, National Estuary Program. So they really fall under a couple categories, and I have a few slides that I'd like to share. So bear with me because I'm going to do this now and get into my slides, show my screen. I'm going to X out of here, and I'm going to start with this. And that might not, there it goes. Okay, super. So 2 themes that where we've been successful, it really comes down to engagement and communication. So the first type of engagement that we think about in building a relationship, not just with our congressional reps and other folks at the state level that we want to have a relationship with, but the staff for these congressional reps, is first this very private level of engagement. So inviting them out to get into the field with us, really small groups, no crowds, no media. If possible, get them into boats or up in the air. Make sure that they have an experience in the resource, like getting wet or muddy, and give them an opportunity to let them talk, let them steer the agenda, and let them learn from you what it is that they really need to learn. And that just reinforces a positive conversation and begins setting the tone for a positive relationship that's about give and take and exchange of information. So I can't encourage folks enough to do that. Okay. Let me go to my next slide. The second piece of engagement is around public engagement, and this is more what we tend to think about, which are the flashier events where you're giving an opportunity to celebrate. You're inviting congressional folks and other leaders to celebrate, whether that's a groundbreaking ceremony or a ribbon cutting ceremony or a tour of a project in progress. It's a time for them to come out and not just touch base with you and be part of a project that they're supporting or finding funding for, but it gives them a chance to interact with their constituents and for you to give them a chance to have some credit. And I want to emphasize the credit piece. It's okay to give them all the credit. They know that there are a lot of partners and people that have gone into this, but they're working very hard and are very passionate, have a lot of things coming at them from different directions. So anytime that you can make sure and give them credit, it always just comes back multifold. Here's a screenshot of the Representative Zeldin from New York from his website. He actually put a media release on his website announcing an almost $500,000 award that he secured for his National Estuary Program. If you were to read the media release itself, you would see also that he also took credit for making sure that the National Estuary Program was funded. So it's just a win-win when you have a congressman celebrating his successes and how he's been able to help the program that you care about as well. Here's a quick photo from San Francisco, and this is Congresswoman Jackie Speier, and this was in her district. She was a strong advocate for and provided funding to do a really large-scale restoration project that reduced flooding impacts to 1,700 properties. So this celebration was all about recognizing that effort in her, and of course, it was all mutually beneficial as she turned back to recognize other partners. So another opportunity for them to be seen, to have recognition, to recognize the National Estuary Program as well, because they, of course, want to do that. So now we get to the communications piece, and this is really about how can you tell your story and how do you tell it in a way that resonates with congressional leaders and others. First of all, it really needs to be authentic. You have to have an authentic messenger, and the message itself should really be human focused. So it's, a lot of times we're used to talking about the environmental benefits for the sake of environmental benefits, but I think we're all evolving to understand it's really important to make sure that you talk about the human benefits, the jobs created, the families, the kids that benefited from the project or the effort. Also talk about public health and other benefits and the number of people affected. So it's very important to do that. And this slide in particular comes out of Florida, and this is about the River Kids. River Kids is an effort to clean up local water that started with 2 girls and a lemonade stand, and at its height grew to 300 school-age kids who took to the halls in their capital in Tallahassee to deliver testimony and walked the halls in DC and delivered testimony there too. So, you get the right authentic messenger telling the story about human impact and why it matters. And that's the most powerful way that you can convey your messages. Also, it doesn't have to be kids. I mean, kids are always appealing, but certainly you have members of industry that are greatly impacted by the positive work that's being done. They want to tell the story. They want to talk about the good work and how it's led them to be more profitable, successful, more environmentally conscious, how it's impacted their ability to increase jobs. So there are a lot of stories there if you can start talking with your folks and figuring out what those stories are and bringing them to your congressman. Just dropped this in quickly. This is a social media post, again, that shows partners engaging in the field with congressmen to, get them a little bit muddy, convey some information, build that passion and those relationships all in one. So again, there are lots of platforms to share this information and to celebrate them being in the field and combining those opportunities for learning and recognition. So as we get closer to the end here, because we only have about 5 to 7 minutes, but plenty of time, as Brian noted, to have Q&A as part of the overall discussion. The methods is a question about this. So what are some of the ways, aside from events, that you can go about engaging folks and giving them recognition and educating as well? One of the best opportunities we have, and again, a big thanks to these Congressional Estuary Caucus members and co-chairs, is you can present your work, your project to the caucus. And there's an opportunity to do that. You can reach out directly to your congressman or woman or one of the sponsoring organizations to help to get on the agenda to be front and center. And again, that gives you a chance to thank them, for them to thank you, and to share the good work and the impact that your program and your project is having. So that's important. And then there are some smaller ways that I'm sure many of you are already engaged with. And don't let an opportunity go by to reach out to the staff for the congressional folks and their offices in general. If you produce a report, send it along. If you have a newsletter, send that along. An annual report, send it along. You've got to stay in front of them. Make sure that they feel comfortable, that they know what's going on in the district and with your work, so that when you reach out to them to actually ask them for something, they feel really confident and up to speed on what you're doing. So that's a big, and there are lots of ways to do that. So I will close with some takeaways that just summarize what we've talked about. First of all, create those opportunities, get those folks out into the resource, recognize them as often as you can, let them take as much credit as they want, and stay on their radar screen, those regular updates of sending them even little bits, even if it's just this, the staff saying, hey, just wanted to let you know this project is going great, or we're going to be celebrating a milestone, or here's our annual report, here's a newsletter we thought you'd be interested in. Ask your partners to speak in support. That's also powerful. As you know, having someone speak for you is more powerful than you speaking about yourself. Crafting that clear human-based narrative about how you're making a difference. Use those people-centric photos in your publications. And then one point that we did not talk about that I do want to mention is clearing these activities up the chain if you need to. So a lot of times when we talk about contact with congressional offices, sometimes there's a little bit of uncertainty as to whether or not you're allowed to do that, where the line is between education and lobbying. It's pretty clear, actually. Anytime you reach out to a congressional office with information about what you're accomplishing, the projects that you've got going on, all of that educational information is completely okay. The lobbying piece, it comes into more when you're asking for legislative support or a certain level of funding, and that that certainly, depending on what how your organization is situated, can be a little trickier. Also, if you sit in, say, a state agency, you might need to just clear up the chain that you're going to have an interaction with a congressional staff or representative. So you just want to make sure that everybody's in the know about what you're doing, and that will give you the confidence to go forward and start to build those relationships and have those open lines of communication with your congressional folks. So 2 things I want to mention before I turn it back to Brian. 2 don'ts, although I hate to end on a negative note. I hope these are more positive thoughts. Don't focus on numbers and those mind-numbing project details that as practitioners, we get into the weeds, we get excited about what it took to get work done. All those details are important to us, but they're not necessarily those high-level human-based messages that we want to hit home with these folks. So the other thing is, don't wait. You're never going to have a perfect opportunity in a perfect setting to invite these folks to come out into your system. Start small, just be in contact with them, invite them out to see a project site or to get in a boat, and you'd be surprised how quickly they'll take you up on that. So don't be intimidated, get started, and that's what I have for now. So I'll turn it back to Brian.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel. And thanks for the nice little checklist that we can leave with people. Next, I want to hand it to Lisa Armiller. Lisa is with the Jacques Cousteau Reserve in New Jersey and is also the current chair of the National Estuarine Research Reserve Association. Lisa, welcome.
Thanks so much, Brian. I am going to try to show my screen. Click this shot. Oh, here we go. Could you just give me a affirmative, Brian, if you can see my picture?
All good. Thanks.
Great. Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate so much the opportunity to be here on behalf of the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. And building off what Rachel said, my job here tonight is to take about 5 minutes to talk to you all about how, through our work at NERA, we are working to connect people to the coast and to the work we do at each of our research reserves. And those people are not only the federally elected officials, but also the people that live and work and like to visit our coastal communities that our reserves are located in. For those of you that don't know, the National Estuarine Research Reserve is quite similar in number to the National Estuary Program. We have 29 reserves located around the coast. Any of the states in green on the map here are states where we have a reserve. And we like to use a tagline of being nationally significant and locally relevant. And what we mean by that is that at each of the 29 reserves, while we're tied together nationally by NOAA, our federal funding agency, we really focus on locally relevant topics to do our work. And I think that's one of the key things, the tie between the national and the local, that really helps our work get traction when we talk to our congressional districts. Like Rachel talked about the National Estuary Program, the work we do at the National Estuarine Research Reserve is really effective because we're driven by some core values. And those values include the idea that our work we do is very needs-based. Also, that we are places and anchors in a community that people can learn from and benefit from. And then finally, not to steal Rachel's word, but I also want to piggyback on the word authentic. All of us that live and work at a research reserve or in the community surrounding the reserve, we love what we do. And you can tell that that authentic passion that comes through our work really is what helps sell how effective our programs are. Building off of these values, I'm going to give you some very specific examples of the work we do and how it translates to educating to our congressional representatives. So I'll start with our first core value, and that is that we're needs-based. And by this, we mean when we are undertaking a research or a monitoring program, we do so not only to answer a science question, but because someone in the community told us they could use that information to help inform their decision. Much like the restoration that helps, that is happening around estuaries around the country, the reserves are places that are sentinel sites where data is collected and then translated to decision makers to help inform their future decisions about the resilience of our coastlines. Additionally, as Rachel said, our science really matters. We do talk a bit about numbers. We talk about how frequently we collect data, how many data points we have, how many millions of acres of land and water we have, but we do so in a very applied way. This isn't just about how many numbers of data points we have. This is about how that data is used. So we talk about whether it's through a storm response or a hazardous oil spill, or whether the shellfish industry is pulling in our data to help them make decisions about whether or not the water's clean enough to keep their shellfish in. It's that kind of collaborative science that we're so key at doing at the reserves that really matters on the ground, and that we have found our federal decision makers are really interested in hearing. My second value is the fact that the NEARs represent anchors in communities. So while we all share that national connection to NOAA and at the federal level, we very much are important places in our communities. In some cases, our visitor centers may even serve as in situ community centers, places where people gather, places where people go when they have a question about the coast or a critter they found that they need someone to help them identify. We are located and live and work within the communities we serve, and so we are very much an essential part of that coastal environment. We channel all that work we do in terms of educating the residents and the visitors at our reserve sites into infographics. And we take those numbers, the number of people we have touched, the number of visitors that have been to our site, the number of students that have interacted with our education staff, and the number of citizens that become citizen scientists, and we can put them into flyers like the one you see here on the screen. And those infographics very powerfully and very succinctly tell the story about not only the work we do, but how much work we do and how we can do that work using very carefully the budget that we have each year through our congressional support. And then finally, ending on the theme of being authentic. And I note that Rachel used the same theme. I think it's maybe this theme that makes us the most effective. And that is that we really come at these issues from the heart, not just from the head, but from where it really matters. And we really touch people. Every February around Valentine's Day, we do an I Heart Estuaries campaign in partnership with other estuary programs. And we connect not only with congressional representatives and tag them through social media, but we connect with the people back at our reserve places, the local community, and we channel what they love about the estuaries in their backyard. We call this our I Heart Estuaries campaign. We also celebrate National Estuaries Week. Again, this is done in partnership with many other estuary programs, but this year we focus specifically on the idea of estuary heroes. It's the people who every day go above and beyond to protect the environment, or to be a volunteer at one of our reserves, or to be a federal elected representative who helps support our budget. Those are our estuary heroes from the local level up to the national level, and it really connects people where it matters. Finally, we really, we focused a lot, at least the past 3 years when our budget has been zeroed out, on the impact of what that budget cut means. And it's much more than just doors of visitor centers being closed. It's really about how those impacts not only affect the children in our community that no longer will be able to have a field trip to the reserve, but also the number of jobs we help create and the tourism dollars that we bring to the local communities. It's those sort of impacts and the way the reserve connects with the coastal community through its education and through its businesses that are another way we connect about our effectiveness to the local congressional representatives. Just like Rachel, we love to get people out in the field. We know that when the congressional reps can get out on a boat, get muddy, get wet, I love the idea of getting them up in the air, as Rachel said, they begin to love a place. And we know when people love something, they want to protect it. So just like Rachel, through the National Estuary programs at the NEARS, we also try to get our congressional reps and our staffers out so they can become true stewards and true champions of the places that we love. And then finally, we make sure that our local congressional reps know how much these local places mean to the people that live there. And so our local friends groups do letter writing campaigns, postcard campaigns, campaigns from boards of directors at local municipal boards. And we have the congressional reps hear from our local citizens, those people that are really benefiting from our work on the ground, about what they love about our places. They don't have to hear it just from us. When they can hear it from the people that are benefiting, that's the really powerful part. So again, I'll just end. We are nationally significant. We are certainly locally relevant, and we feel like it's our core values that really connect us not only to the people that live and work around the reserve system and get to recreate in our reserves, but also the people at the federal level who have been so great to help continue to support us so well over all these years. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to change gears here now and talk to a few folks who work very closely with our congressional members and with the budgets that we all depend on, and get their insights into this question. So we're going to start with Melissa Zimmerman. Melissa's staff to the Senate Interior Appropriations Subcommittee that oversees EPA accounts, including the National Estuary Program. So Melissa, thanks for joining us.
Great, thanks for having me. I first want to start out and thank Rachel and Lisa for their pitches to get the staff out in the field. We like planes and boats and airplanes. That's a lot more fun. It kind of makes it worth it on our late nights in the Capitol, and our sort of crazy weekends and things. I sort of say it in jest because it's the way for us to get out and see the things that we get to work on. But it is absolutely true, when I'm sitting in a conference room and think about, certain programs and places I've been and people I've talked to, it really does speak to me. And Darren and I have worked together for years too. And you sort of sit there and you're tired and you run out of money and you think we can't, we heard from these people and your voices and your stories really, come into our minds at those times. I feel like over the years, I've worked on the committee for 12 years on a number of different agencies, several different subcommittees, and I've had, hundreds of meetings with national stakeholder groups, with local groups, state groups, and even several internal meetings among congressional staff, which are important too, as they sort of bring in their priorities. So they're reflecting what I think a lot of folks on this in this conference are doing, is talking to individual member offices who then come talk to us and tell us what their priorities are. And those are sort of closed door meetings too. So those are important. And, we've reviewed thousands of letters over the years talking about, what people's priorities are. And, the message I want to send today, I think, is, we are in unprecedented times. This is my first speaking at a conference on a Zoom. We also have unprecedented political times too, but the sort of old-fashioned advocacy is still in play. It's making personal connections, bringing, personal stories. And it is true, if you wonder, we do read all of those letters. They do mean something to us, and they mean something to our members. Whether it be, don't forget this program, or, we're in some heated debate on the floor, those things really matter. I mean, there are definitely times I have pulled up, look, we have 30 letters on this. We have, I took meetings with people, and I know Senator, so-and-so is a real big proponent of this, and he's vocal, and he'll be down on the floor if we do anything with this. with this program. So, you know, as sort of times change and become weirder by the day, you know, the old-fashioned contact, I think, still really stands. In terms of EPA in particular, you know, I handle EPA and the National Estuaries Program, and budget caps have been tight for the past, you know, really more than a decade. It's difficult, and you know, I have to remind everyone that these programs are not the at issue, right? We have national issues and sort of bigger picture problems that unfortunately bubble down to us having, you know, difficulty and, you know, providing huge increases for programs, you know, no matter how popular they are. A cap is a cap, and every time we would increase a program, in a lot of cases in the past few years, we would have had to decrease, you know, somewhere else, which are also really hard decisions too. So, you know, maintaining emphasis on this program, on the National Estuaries Program, which has been small increases over the past few years, is, I think, a real win in this environment. And I share the frustration as a staffer who sits and cares about these programs and sees sort of smaller increases than I would like to see, and that I know could be used very well by people who are listening here today. But I do want to emphasize that, you know, we are in the business of incremental change, and a small increase this year with a small increase next year and a small increase the year after, that all really, really adds up. And so your efforts and advocacy every year, you know, coming in, you know, do we still read these letters? Do you still say the same thing to us? Yes. I mean, the answer is definitely yes. It does make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, and so next we have Darren Benjamin. Darren's with, he's staff to the House Committee for Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations. It's a subcommittee that he's on a subcommittee that oversees NOAA accounts. And this is where the Coastal Zone Management Program, you know, line falls in, and it's sort of a different animal than these other programs that are the CZM program is a little less place-based. So it's interesting to hear perspectives, and maybe we can explore that a little bit further too, about the difference between programs that have that real benefit of being super place-based versus programs that have a much broader geographic mission. But sorry to just kind of divert there a little bit. Darren, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Brian. Yeah, I'd love to explore those things too as well. In fact, I have a strong suspicion that most all of you know more about those differences than I do. I am brand new to the Commerce, Justice, Science subcommittee for the House Appropriations. I've been doing this for 15 years, going on 15 years with House Appropriations, but this is my first year with, I suppose I should look at the camera, shouldn't I? But it's my first year with Commerce, Justice, Science. So I'm going up a learning curve in the middle of a pandemic and everything else, trying to digest these programs. And you know, unless you want to sacrifice, you know, sleep, you sort of can only focus your time, especially in your first year, on an account. You sort of focus on what's eating your lunch, right? And so, you know, right now, to be honest, habitat, you know, coastal issues, you know, aside from the hurricanes, the larger habitat issues are not eating my lunch. But I would love to turn that around because that's been a passion of mine as well. I come up through a fisheries background. Never wanted to get into politics. I was a biologist, although I suppose if I was any good at it, I'd still be doing it. But I came to DC to figure out why can't we get any money for conservation? And after 3 years of being in DC, I didn't have any more money, but at least I knew why. So I've kind of been passionate about, you know, seeing what we can do for funding and policy for conservation for a long, long time. So it's a real treat for me to be able to speak before all of you today. So I realize I'm kind of the last one between us in questions, so I'll just be brief here, and I'll start with a pop quiz, really. And maybe as you all think about the answers, maybe you can shoot them in through the chat, or Brian, you can help us with this. But I want to know how many of you know right off the top of your head how many members of Congress represent a coastal district. Because where I'm going with that is that the member support is really what drives the work that I do, particularly in the minority. And so we have this process. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but generally it starts at the beginning of a calendar year, which marks the beginning of a fiscal year cycle, with the president's budget coming up in February and hearings, and then an opportunity for members of Congress to weigh into House Appropriations Committee. And so those members that weigh in make a big difference. We have an extensive database of these requests. We track them religiously, and those programs that are the most popular, if you will, popularity doesn't drive the whole train, but it certainly matters, and so the more members that weigh in on a multi-member letter in support of some of these programs, the further it will go. And so that's why I'm asking, how many of you know how many are in a coastal district? Because I'd like to sort of throw some homework at you and perhaps think about making this your goal. I would love to see a multi-member letter each year for these programs signed by every single member representing a coastal district. Now there's some weight. And if you reach that goal, I'll throw it even further and wrap in all the members representing districts that are impacted by storm surges from the coasts. And then we really got some numbers. Maybe we'll even figure out a way to get Kansas involved at some point, in the future, who knows. But anyways, it's a pleasure to be here. One thing I should also note is that we're a small staff in the House minority on approps, and so I also have the honor of continuing to work on the Interior and Environment Subcommittee. I don't handle the EPA account directly. My colleague Kristen Clarkson does, but I'm still involved in that bill, involved in the Fish and Wildlife Service, the coastal program, and related programs as well. So I'd be happy to try and answer any questions on those topics as well, along with Melissa. So thanks, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you, Darren. So we don't have a lot of time left for questions. I'm going to probably go over just a little bit. I do want to just follow up, and I think Melissa, you raised this at first, and it's just sort of, I think it's something we're all thinking about, is the reality of our day, given COVID and just the sort of the turmoil in the world, and yet we're all out here trying to do our work. And so, Melissa, your advice was, advocacy still works. I'm just wondering if any of the panelists have thoughts on, ways to approach this given this time. How are things being done virtually? What are there things that you've seen that have been maybe different here, but maybe are working? And I'm just trying to think about that. There's probably a bunch of people on this call who have this same kind of question at this point in time. So any thoughts from the panelists would be helpful.
I mean, at this point, I'm still doing, phone calls and Zoom meetings, and it's not that different. Next year will feel very different because we sort of have a cyclical nature to it, right? As Darren said, the president's budget comes up, and then that's when we really start our meetings. And so I'm interested to see how that will evolve as well. One of the things that I've really enjoyed working from home are some of the videos and being able to watch conferences and speakers, and some of them that are recorded. I watched one today. I have a small child at home, so I have a lot to manage, but I was able to watch one today while I was doing some food prep. And so I thought, well, this is kind of a cool new world. I got to watch an hour-long talk on zoonotic diseases. So I think that format is like an interesting opportunity. But again, it's old-fashioned. It's the personal communication, and that's going to continue. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it will continue to be it. I wonder if letters are going to be emphasized a little bit more, and kind of working for the signatures, maybe, because it's going to be harder just practically to get with us as easily, or seeing, you see people in the cafeteria. It's kind of like a high school and in the Senate, and I think the House as well. You're not running into people in the same way. So I think kind of doubling back on the letters really helps.
Yeah, great, thanks. Others?
Yeah, Melissa hit it on the head. The work continues, just virtually, most of it. So one thing I forgot to mention, along these same lines is that oftentimes, when the president's budget does come up, that's when a whirlwind in a normal year, a whirlwind of people coming up to the Hill, sort of hit the Hill, hike the Hill, do all these things on the Hill all at the same time. And we really do get overwhelmed pretty easily, especially me, the older I get. So for me, sort of year round, I think Rachel said it well, that, sort of this year round relationship building, touching base every now and then with updates, to me can be really more valuable, because that gives me time to sort of get, the facts embedded. So that when we do get really busy, those facts come to me real easy, and your handouts don't get lost in an inbox and all that stuff. So really want to emphasize that point of, take advantage of this time to sort of reach out, emails. Hey, can we do just a quick meet and greet web conference? I'm speaking for me now, but once you get, my email and phone number, and we make that initial connection, take advantage of it. Stay in touch with me, and you're not overburdening me. I'll let you know, but usually, people don't, and so take advantage of it. Keep me informed, especially when things are in the news and that I need to know about, and tell me why they're relevant to the bill I'm working on. That's really valuable and appreciated, especially, when it's not March and we're crazy busy.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so take advantage of Darren. That was the message I heard. So any last thoughts from Rachel or Lisa on this?
Yeah, I'd like to be a little bit provocative in the COVID world and say that this is actually a good time to get your state staff and even maybe some congressional reps out into the field. Most of our programs have figured out how to take safety precautions and do that well. And if you're outside, there's no safer place to be, right? Also, people's schedules are flexible enough now. There's more flexibility in people's schedules that it actually enables there to be some in-person, and I think everyone's appreciating that more. So this actually could be a really nice time to reach out and say, hey, at least to the staff, because they're the first folks that you need to get out and develop that relationship with, to come out and just spend half an hour on a site with you. Not a long time, but something small. So I'd encourage that.
Great, thanks, Rachel. And Lisa, last thoughts.
Sure, I'll build off of what Melissa said. I think at the reserve sites, we've really taken the challenge of COVID as an opportunity to think about the way we deliver programs more creatively. So what we've seen in some of our decision maker trainings is actually more people are able to participate than before, because people are looking for opportunities to gain knowledge over time. And the idea that you can watch a recorded event and overall the net benefit is positive in terms of the number of people. So yeah, we're trying to look as the glass is half full when we can.
Awesome, great advice. Okay, so unfortunately we are out of time. We didn't get a chance to get to many questions, but you guys all provided a lot of great detailed information, and I think it was really helpful. So with that, I want to thank you, Rachel, Lisa, Darren, and Melissa, for your time today. I also want to give another shout out again to our Estuary Caucus members who joined this panel virtually as well, and that's Representative Bonamici, Larson, Mast and Posey. I merged those together and I said Mosey, and so it's not that. It's Mast and Posey. And also thanks to everybody out there in virtual land sitting in your screens, who joined us for this conversation. I hope that it was helpful to you, and you can also sort of move forward and take advantage of some of these ideas and put them into action. So with that, I wish you all best, that you all stay safe and healthy, and I'm going to hand it back to Daniel Hayden with Restore America's Estuaries to close out the 2020 summit. Thanks, everybody.
contentious election season, to have such a cogent and congenial conversation about how to work with Congress. So I really appreciate you working with us on this virtual format and being able to reach new audiences through this virtual summit. I think this has been a year where we've seen record hurricanes, storms sweeping through the Midwest, wildfires in the West. And this summit community really understands the threats to our natural systems. And this summit community is also part of the solution. And so after the summit, as we go out and we talk to our communities and elected officials, we all know that the people, the economy, and nature, they're not separate political issues. And we shouldn't speak as if we have to make a choice amongst them. So thinking about this summit, personally over the past 3 days have really flown by for me. There's a lot of sessions that I'm looking forward to seeing in the virtual format. I know a lot of us have struggled with the fact we're working remotely. We've got emails coming in, we're dealing with some childcare issues, ongoing work obligations. But I do want to remind you that all the content will be available on this platform through April of 2021. So, take the time, whether you're cutting vegetables like Melissa was saying, or, bored of those Netflix movies, come back to the summit and enjoy some of the content that we have. What I've seen over the last 3 days really excites me. I really think what we've done here is a model of how to make change happen. What we've done is that we've come together, we've shared our experiences, we've gone and we've seen new perspectives, we've shared our data and the science, and we're doing all this to help solve problems, to restore, maintain, and expand the living systems upon which we all depend. And I encourage you to continue after the summit, to support each other, to engage your federal, state, and local officials, to forge new partnerships for inclusive and better solutions, and to keep up the good work to ensure resilient coasts, thriving habitats, and vibrant communities for everybody in all communities. So we'll see each other again in 2 years' time, and I look forward to working with you in the meantime. So in the interim, please stay safe and keep up the great work. Thanks very much for all your work. Have a great evening.